Fokus nå, eller? Håper det. So. Without further ado, let's get started. Hey everyone, so I'm back at my farm here in Colombia, Finca El Suelo. I haven't been here for about 3 months, and today is mid-August, 18th of August. So I'm basically here for 2 weeks to make a lot of compost, because as you can see in the back here, the farm is extremely dry. It hasn't been raining for a lot in both June and July, so the soil is very, very dry. And as you may know, I'm trying to do biological farming, which means we're trying to kind of grow the microorganisms in the soil. And if there's no moisture in the soil, it's very, very difficult to get the soil health back again. So my trees are suffering, my soil is very dry. I was planting a lot of clover and other cover crops in May, but unfortunately most of it has dried out and didn't really grow well. So I'm back here again to plant a little bit more, as well as making a lot of compost. So let me show you a little bit around the farm, because today's the first day. So what I normally do and what I'm going to do now is to collect some soil samples from the farm, so I can check the microorganisms in a microscope to see, whether the soil has improved or not. So let me show you how to do that. So this is an apple core, and this is what we use, or I use, to take soil samples. So I'll try to take soil samples from trees that are not so good, trees that are good, and then I mix them in the small Ziploc bag, and then I take a small sample to analyze under the microscope later. So just take a few inches of the topsoil to see if there's any good organisms, and then we compare it with tests we've done previously to see if we are growing organisms, or if it's status quo, or if we're losing organisms. So far it's mainly bacterial colonization in the soil here, so we need to increase the fungal population, and also predators that eat the fungus and bacteria like nematodes and protozoa. Then if we have the full life cycle or full soil food web, then hopefully the coffee trees will survive. But as you can see, this one, almost no leaves, very, very dry, but it's going to produce more. It looks like it's been eaten by ants and also dried out, so hopefully with a little bit of work and a little bit of rain, these will survive and grow a little bit more. This is how most of our geisha trees are looking like at the moment. Quite yellow, and not a lot of leaves, a lot of died branches, and not the best. So hopefully my work for the next 2 weeks will help them progress a little bit, and let's hope for some rain. So this is actually the only geisha tree that is looking pretty good. All the other ones look miserable. They might be dead, and most of them don't have leaves, but this one for some reason likes where it grows. So I don't really know why, because I've analyzed the soil on this tree and the one next to it, and I haven't really found a huge difference. So it's a mystery to me. Maybe it's because it can tolerate the drought a little bit more, because I've figured out, not just from my farm but other farms, that geisha doesn't really like super dry conditions. And we haven't had rain in a couple of months almost, so the soil is super dry and most of the trees are dead. Our tipica is looking much better actually, but the geisha doesn't really like these conditions. So I really need to plant a lot of yucca plants and other kind of small shade trees before the shade trees, the real shade trees are fully grown. And I think I also need to figure out a way to mulch so that we can keep the moisture in the soil. So what I do is probably put a little bit of compost underneath or on the soil, and then put some mulch on top of it, and then pray that we'll get some rain. Otherwise these plants are gonna die. A lot of people ask me if we're growing coffee on the shade, and not at the moment, because we just planted shade trees 2 years ago. Some of them didn't survive, some got eaten by ants. This one is looking pretty good, so hopefully this will survive. But it takes a while for them to grow. So what we're gonna do is to plant some temporary shade, kind of like yucca, maybe some platanos, maybe some corn and other plants. And then hopefully that'll help the coffee grow a little bit faster now, and also keep the moisture in the soil, because the more plants you have in the soil, the better. So one of the big problems we have on the farm are these ants. And they are quite interesting because they actually farm. So what they'll do, they'll actually take and chew up the coffee leaves, the leaves on the coffee trees and other plants around. And then they bring that back to their nest, where they actually grow a type of fungus that they eat. So they don't actually eat the leaves. They feed it to a fungus and then eat the fungus. So that's quite interesting. But I don't really want this on my farm. So how can I get rid of them since I'm not using chemicals or anything? Well, there is actually a fungus that I can use, that we can use to remove or to kill coffee berry borer, or the broca. They also work on the farm, so no, on the ants. So what I'll do is to brew a compost tea, add some spores of Beauveria besaina, that's the fungus, and then I'll pour that into the nest, and then hopefully the queen will turn into a little white fuzzball because the fungus actually eats it. So when the queen dies, the nest goes away, and I have been managing to kill a couple of them, but this one is so big, so I really need to have a go at it for the second time. Here's one of the shade trees, and you can see some of the leaves have been eaten by those ants, but hopefully they've stopped. This one is a Pavlonia, or Pavlovia, I don't remember, but it's supposed to grow fast. At the moment it's looking pretty thirsty. Another shade tree. So this is one of our better looking tipicas. The tipica seems to do a little bit better than the geisha, although it's not looking great. We have some trees with leaf rust. A lot of them have died, but there's a section of the farm where the trees are actually growing a little bit better, like this one. Some of them are greener than this. We had one cherry on one of them, and yeah, hopefully these ones will give us a small, tiny little harvest in 2 or 3 years. You see there's a lot of straw laying around here. That's probably part of the reason why these are doing better, because the straw actually keeps the moisture in the soil a little bit better. So I'm going to plant a little bit more cover crops here, and hopefully that'll survive, but we need a lot of rain for them to survive. We planted cover crops in April, May as well, and it rained, so they started to sprout, but unfortunately a lot of the ants took a lot of the beans, and the alfalfa and clover and oats just disappeared, so they probably dried out because of lack of rain. So hopefully now it's going to rain a lot more in September, October and November, and also December. So hopefully the seeds that we're going to plant on this trip will survive, and will cover the soil so that the plants can grow a little bit better. Green tipica, looking pretty sweet. Guess what? Just found a coffee cherry on one of our tipica trees. I actually found some in January as well, but they disappeared. This one is almost red, but you can see that it has a black spot, so this is gonna rot. But I am gonna pick it and see how it tastes like. Very vegetal as expected, since it's not fully ripe. But leaving this on the tree would probably just make it go black, so why not pick it now? Hooray! We're producing coffee! So it's my second day on the farm, and we collected a lot of pasture yesterday. You can see behind me, I'm standing on a mountain of pasture. So today starts the hard work, which is making compost piles, and I have enough material, I think, to make 4 big piles. Unfortunately, Diego is not here with me like he normally is, so I have to do this all alone. But I have some friends behind me here. You can see them behind the tree up there. They're collecting cow droppings. And I have a lot of wood shavings that I bought last time from a carpenter, local carpenter. So now starts the hard work. Without further ado, let's get started. So, how do I make the compost? Well, we collected grass clippings and weed clippings, so what we call pasture. That's kind of the green material, but since it's been very dry here, half of it is kind of dried out, so that means I don't have to collect as much woody material. So we use about 30 to 40% of these grass clippings. Then we have leaves from the forest, which we collected from the forest floor. We have some wood shavings from a carpenter that has been laying out in bags for a couple of months. That makes sure the wood shaving gets moist, and also you get a little bit of fungus growing in it before you even start composting. And last but not least, our friends, the cows, have made a lot of nice cow shit that kind of gets the party started. So we use about 10% cow shit, then around 60% woody material, and then 30 to 40% green material. What I'm doing now is to mix all of the ingredients before I put them in these kind of metal cases, and then it starts to decompose. And it's very important that the moisture is about 50% in this material, otherwise the microorganisms won't start growing because they need water. And hopefully in a couple of days, like 3-4 days, the temperature will be around 65 to 70 degrees Celsius, and that's when we need to turn it. And hopefully I don't need to turn this more than 3 or 4 times, because I'm making 4 massive piles, and that's a lot of work. So yeah, let's see and get started. So yesterday I spent the whole day building this huge compost pile, and it started off on 25 degrees in the afternoon, and today, this morning, it's 38 degrees, so it's heating up really, really fast, which is great. So now I'll just have to take the rest of this material and the shit that is underneath there and build 2 new big piles. So I'm gonna build 3 huge piles in total on this trip. And this is how they look like after a couple of months. You can't really see, but it just becomes soil inside there. So the straw will kind of dry out on the outside, but there's definitely a lot of soil on the inside. So this is how our compost looks like. Dark chocolate brown. Smells a lot like forest soil. And after a couple of months, the piles that I just made will look like this. And still we need to check the biology, because let's say they got too wet or something, then they might go anaerobic. But if they are aerobic and have good organisms, we're gonna first of all extract it in water and then spray it all over our land. And then we'll actually brew some tea, which means we put some of this compost in a tea bag, or kind of a tea bag in a bucket, and then we add some foods for the organisms to eat so that they start growing. And then that compost tea we can spray on the leaves, so we prevent leaf rust and everything. Oh, it just smells amazing. It smells like a forest floor. And yeah. And then at the end of the week, we're gonna put this compost on the coffee trees, around the coffee trees, and then put some mulch around it. And then hopefully the organisms will have enough food, and hopefully there will be lots of rain, so that the organisms can grow. So I really hope that this time the trees can progress a little bit, because we have plenty of compost, so there's nothing to worry about. So I spent almost a week at Finca El Suelo and Finca Tamana, and what I'm doing today, together with Diego, because Diego came to help me, finally. What are we doing, Diego?
So we are spreading some compost and cover it with some grass.
Yeah, so we're putting compost around the trees, finished compost, and then we put straw and grass as mulch around. So in order to keep the moisture in the soil, and also for the compost to function, it's kind of like a food for the microorganisms that are in the compost. Hard work, huh, Diego? We spent all day doing this, and I did it alone 2 days ago, which was really hard, because then it was 25 degrees and just baking sun. Today it's been a little cloudy and a little bit of rain and a little bit of sun, so not too bad, but still super, super hard. Life as a farmer is the hardest, you know, being stressed and and exhausted in the city is nothing compared to this, but it's kind of in a good way because you get to sleep well and it's nice and quiet and fresh air. So, anything else, Diego?
No.
Let's go and have some dinner, huh?
Yeah.
Ciao. So it's the last working day here at the Finca El Suelo, and today we're actually planting sunflower. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to produce a lot of organic material that we can chop down so it'll become food for the microorganisms. Also, sunflower has a very long taproot and it grows really fast, so the taproot can maybe break the compaction layer that we have having in the soil about 1/2 meter down. And yeah, since it grows fast, I'm hoping that these will survive, because the stuff we planted in April just died because of the drought. Now it's the beginning of the rainy season, so these sunflowers should probably grow at least to 1 meter tall before they die, which is okay. So let's see how it works. Today is Saturday and I am in Thessalia, which is a small town that is about 1 hour drive from my farm. And this is my kind of local gardener. He sells shade trees and other plants. And today I'm actually buying Mani forajero, which is a leguminous kind of a ground cover plant, similar to clover, but with very, very strong roots. It's also leguminous, so it has nodules on the roots where there is a bacteria that can actually fix nitrogen from the air. And then, of course, this is a nitrogen fixing plant. So in a good biological farm or organic farm, this is very, very good for the plants because it means more nitrogen. I'm buying 400 small little poly bags with this plant to plant around my farm, because it really spreads and grows really fast. Another good thing about this is that it suppresses weeds, because it kind of takes over the whole ground cover. So really looking forward to planting this, because my hill or the farm is a hillside, as you've seen, and there's a lot of erosion. So this will probably prevent the soil from kind of being dragged down with the rain, and also help keep the moisture in the soil, which is good for the plants. So today we are planting some new cultivars in our museum, which is at the entrance of the farm. We have around 5 to 10 trees of each cultivar, or variety if you want. And we're planting these just to see whether they taste good or not. So we want them to grow fast, so we just plant a couple of trees, and then we're gonna harvest the seeds or the cherries out of those in 2 or 3 years, probably 3 years, and then taste. If they're really good, we might plant them in our farm. If they're not, we'll just keep the trees just for curiosity, because some of them look a little different. We have one called erecta, which is very tall, another one called columnaris, which is also very tall. We have some semperflorens, which will have flowers all year round. And we have one called Jima. And we have some other ones in the nursery that I can't remember the name of. But hopefully in 4 or 5 years, this will be a really nice little museum where you can see different varieties in the entrance of our farm. The little hill that you see in front of you, which is kind of bare with no coffee trees on, that's Finca El Suelo. It's part of it. So you'll see the closest part is where we planted geisha, and in the back of that hill we planted tipica. The farm goes down into a forest, down to a water stream, but we only planted this little hill with coffee so far. A lot of people have asked me why I planted geisha on the Finca El Suelo, but I think that is actually quite obvious. I think geisha among SL28 and other cultivars are one of the better ones that have been discovered so far. And we do have SL28 on Elias's farm, which is my neighbor farm just over here. And that's tasting great, so I wanted to see how the geisha tastes like here in Colombia. One of the really nice things with geisha varieties is that it can taste exceptional, like jasmine, citrus, tangerine and so on. But I have tasted quite a few geishas from Colombia that hasn't been tasting that great, to be honest. And there might be 2 reasons for this. One, according to Sene Café, the geisha that they have there has been contaminated with another variety, so it's been kind of crossbred and it's not a pure geisha. And 2, I think the geisha actually needs good altitude and a lot of shade in order to really taste great. And in most farms that I've tasted the geishas from don't have shade, they don't necessarily have the good altitude and too much sun. Obviously it needs more water than we can get here, and obviously more nutrients as well. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I am curious to try the geisha here. It's not resistant against leaf rust, which means I do have to work my organic or biological farming skills in order to prevent the plants from getting leaf rust, which is kind of part of the purpose of this project. This is one of our tipica trees, and the reason why I planted tipica on my farm is one, because it's not resistant against leaf rust. And that means I can try to prove that biological farming, you can do it without spraying fungicides and still not have leaf rust on the trees. We don't have a lot of leaf rust on these. There's probably 5 trees out of maybe 1,000 that has leaf rust at the moment. But we just did a compost tea around spraying compost tea on the leaves, and that should prevent the leaf rust from breaking out, and also keep the organisms on the leaves so they kind of occupy the leaves, so the leaf rust don't have any kind of space to start to grow. The other reason I planted tipica is because I know that this tipica tastes really, really nice. And I just like these kind of floral coffees. I don't think we come across them very often, especially in Colombia. So that's one of the reasons why I planted tipica. And as you can see, they're actually doing a little bit better than the geisha. They're growing a little bit taller, and still they're not looking great. They're quite yellow. It should be dark green. But I'm really hoping that within the next couple of months, once we get some more rain and I can add some more compost, these trees will for sure do a little bit better. So hopefully this variety will give us the first harvest on the farm. We already have harvested 1 cherry, but maybe in 2 or 3 years we will have the first harvest on the farm. I can't guarantee that it'll be big, but hopefully it'll be at least something to taste. This is one of our katra trees, and we planted around 1,200 katra trees. There are probably 200 or 300 left. But this one seems to be doing quite well. It's growing under a shade tree, so it has a lot of leaves or dead leaves on the ground, which means the soil will for sure be better than in the field where there's no trees at the moment. So the reason why I planted katra is because most of the farmers around here are actually traditionally growing katra. The problem is it's not resistant against leaf rust, so a lot of farmers have lost many of their crops in the past years, which means they're changing their cultivars to resistant cultivars such as Castillo. But I wanted to see if I could grow good katra in this area with biological farming, so that's the reason why I'm growing it. Again, this is katra, and it's growing in the forest, so that's why it looks great. Behind me is a little nursery of some different cultivars that we have managed to get some seeds here and there. And these were actually planted in January. They were actually coffee beans, and then we planted them into small boxes with sand, and we've been watering them every day. And then in April they were big enough to be replanted into these small little poly bags. And now it's going to take another 6-7 months before we're actually going to plant them in our museum. So hopefully we'll find something interesting here that we can plant on our farm in the future. To mention a few, we have some Eugenioides, which is supposedly one of the parents of Arabica coffee. We have some Sudan Rumé, we have some that are unknown, and then we have, I can't really read all the signs, I don't remember all the name. But fortunately, or hopefully, we will be able to taste some of these in about 3 years. So this is a kind of a long-term project for us to try to grow cultivars or find cultivars, find seeds and grow them on the farm to taste them and see if they taste good. And if they do taste good and are reasonably resistant to leaf rust, then we can plant them and make some better coffees in the future. Oh my God. That tastes incredible. It's like candy.